Edward, Duke of Windsor, was a man who has obsessed historians and journalists for decades. As King Edward VIII, he reigned for just 326 days before abdicating in disgrace. Best known for his affair and subsequent marriage to Wallis Simpson, history records him as one of the great romantics, a man who sacrificed his throne and prestige for love. As a couple, the Windsors dominated gossip columns and society parties, epitomizing a gilded existence for many adoring British subjects. Over 20 years after Edward's death, this idealized legend is still the authorized version. But the romantic headlines and romanticized biographies have concealed darker truths about Edward. Evidence has now emerged that he passed national secrets to foreign governments, of his complicity with Adolf Hitler, and of illegal financial dealings which netted him millions of pounds. The royal family and successive British governments have done everything to prevent this information about Edward being made public. For 60 years, the enduring notion has been that the only reason for Edward's downfall was his love for Mrs. Simpson. But this was the final straw for the establishment. The truth is that Edward's unacceptable political beliefs and willful actions were the key reasons for his removal. Edward's escapades in Germany produced outrage within the British establishment. It was perceived as a self-serving publicity stunt by the Duke in favor of appeasing Hitler. All newspaper reports of his trip were censored. But this was not the case in the United States. This was due to be the next destination for the Duke to promote his message of a negotiated peace. President Roosevelt insisted that the visit was called off. Roosevelt's suspicions about Edward's misguided adventures had been raised in a secret State Department report, which we found locked away in the University of Delaware. In June 1937, George Messersmith was a young American diplomat in Vienna when he met the Windsors at an official dinner. Believing that he was speaking in confidence, Messersmith revealed to the Duke that a train carrying an illicit cargo of naval munitions from Germany to Italy had just crashed in Austria. This disclosure was top secret because it revealed that American intelligence agents had broken secret Italian military ciphers. Nonetheless, the Duke betrayed Messersmith's secret to an Italian diplomat at the dinner party. A shamefaced Messersmith reported the devastating leak back to Roosevelt, confirming the president's worst fears. As Hitler escalated his aggression, Edward's behavior raised serious questions. Was it naive folly or calculated treason? In the spring of 1939, Edward again showed his appetite for meddling in international affairs. In a direct attempt to influence American popular opinion, the exiled Duke made a radio broadcast. His message was world peace, but this could only be peace on Hitler's terms. With England and Germany on a collision course, Edward clung to his improbable formula for appeasement, which he had planned with the Nazis. He chose a symbolic location from which to make the broadcast, the ancient French town of Verdun, scene of one of the fiercest battles of the First World War, where over 500,000 men had died.
I am speaking tonight from Verdun, and as I talk to you from this historic place, I am deeply conscious of the presence of the great company of the day. I speak simply as a soldier of the last war. The supreme importance of averting war will, I feel confident, impel all those in power to renew their endeavors to bring about a peaceful settlement.
Although the broadcast was never heard in Britain, due to pressure from the royal family, in the United States, the Duke's words had enormous impact. Edward remained a law unto himself, ignoring the best interests of his countrymen.
The speech Edward gave at Verdun shows how far he was out of touch with the way in which opinion had developed in Britain after Munich. And indeed, the evidence suggests that it had already begun to swing very heavily against Hitler before Christmas '38. One of the important elements in this being the lengthy discussion of where he was going to strike next, the other being the anti-Jewish pogrom of early November 1938. It shows really that Edward had already lost touch with the way in which opinion was moving among the bulk of the English people.
The evidence offered by the German foreign policy documents seems indisputable. Edward had jeopardized his country and the Allies.
The German records make it very clear that the Duke was the source of the information. If it was witting, he was a spy and a traitor. If it was unwitting, then at the very least he was careless, and somebody in his position should have known better.
We don't know whether he had any orders. On the face of it, he should have rejoined his unit. He should have gone back to Britain with the rest of the liaison officers when they were withdrawn. What he did instead was to correct his wife dramatically and romantically and buzz off to the south of France and then via there into Spain and in Portugal. And I cannot help feeling that anybody else this would have been regarded as desertion in the face of the enemy. I think he simply, as in everything else he did, put himself and his wife ahead of his country and his loyalties and his family, the rest of his family and his brother the king, and so on.
Over the next 2 months, there was an extraordinary struggle between Hitler and Churchill for the Duke's loyalties. The Nazis were desperate to keep him in Spain, so they could negotiate with him directly. Churchill insisted that the couple return to Britain. To buy time, Edward made demands he knew were unacceptable to Churchill. He insisted that his wife be accorded the title of Her Royal Highness.
The Duke of Windsor was occupying Churchill's time by making demands, again, about the question of the HRH for the Duchess, and ridiculous details like could he take his soldier servant with him and excuse him from military duty, which is, again, pretty shocking thing at that time in the war. And it's unbelievable that Churchill should have to occupy himself with such triviality at a moment like that.
If his wife were recognized as a member of the royal family, and if he were appointed to a military or civilian position of influence, Windsor has expressed himself to the foreign minister in strong terms against Churchill and against this war.
God is waiting for a turn of events favorable to him. He is convinced that if he had remained on the throne, war would have been avoided. And he characterizes himself as a firm supporter of a peaceful arrangement with Germany. The Duke believes with certainty that continued heavy bombing will make England ready for peace.
He was suggesting that prolonged bombing of England would almost certainly bring about peace, which is an almost incredible thing for an Englishman to say, which would mean the deaths of so many of his fellow countrymen. And it also was a particularly dangerous moment for the British government for him to be taking this line, because there was a certain pro-peace party in Britain at that time.